all the power for 3 minutes.
Oh boy. Now we're in trouble.
Can we stop Roger's video?
My view. Or did or stop?
Stop. Oh, so he stopped. You didn't. Got it.
It just felt a little odd to not have a tie with this suit.
I'd have to think about it.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Thank you. So we're going to start the meeting now. Thanks for joining us for our annual inaugural regional board meeting. I'll call this meeting to order from Wednesday, November 1st, 2023. I'd like to acknowledge that we're holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin people. And as it's our first annual meeting of November, the first order of business is election of the chair. I'll call upon the assembly 3 times for nominations for the position of chair. So I'll start now. I'll call for the first time for nominations for the position of chair.
So Sandy.
Director McCormick.
I nominate Director Brander.
Okay, thank you. Director Brander, do you accept this nomination?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
I'll call a second time for nominations for the position of chair. I'll call for a third and final time for nominations for the position of chair. As no other nominations have been received, Director Brander is awarded the position of chair by acclamation, and I will now hand over chairing this meeting to him.
All right. Very much, Michelle, and I just want to say thank you to the board members for the confidence they've placed in me. I really appreciate it. So, corporate officer has already done the land acknowledgement and welcomed you to the meeting. So we will move on to the approval of the agenda.
With an item number 2.
Oh, I'm sorry. Election of the vice chair. Yes. So do we have somebody who would like to make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Director Fall, seconded by Director Lennox. Is there any discussion concerning it? Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I know our policy is that we elect a vice chair on a rotating basis, but from observing other regional districts and even regional hospital district, I've been seeing the benefit of electing a vice chair to serve throughout the entire year's term. I believe that hospital districts are meeting collectively, Sunshine Coast, Squamish, and our regional hospital district, and watching their regional district meeting, their chair announced that they will be meeting with the chairs and vice chairs. So myself, I think that it would be actually a time to change and to elect a vice chair to work collaboratively with the chair for the duration of the year.
I'm not really sure how to answer that. Director Corporate Officer.
Thank you, Chair. The procedure bylaw, section 122, does indicate annually at the inaugural board meeting, the board will designate its eligible members other than the chair to serve as the vice chair on a rotating basis according to alphabetical order of director surname. So there's more to go with that, but we would likely need to amend the procedure bylaw prior to holding a different method.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much. Dr. Gisborne.
Well, in response to that, the item is still a motion on the table, and the board procedure bylaw, I don't think, can fetter my vote. So whether I choose to go a different route, the motion is on the floor. Otherwise, if we just have to follow the board procedure bylaw, then why even have the motion?
Corporate Officer.
I will say that that was discussed between administration, and as the procedure bylaw says that you guys will designate it, it is up to the assembly to do that. So if you were going to go away from that, we would need a 2/3 majority vote.
Okay. Well, we have a motion in front of us that has been moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to speak in favor of the recommendation that's on the table. The way it is gives every director an opportunity to serve as vice chair, and we may not need to do anything, but it's still nice to have that opportunity. And so I think what we have now is pretty equitable, and I'd like to continue with that process.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other comments? Seeing none other, back to Director Gisborne.
In response to that, input from Director McCormick, the role of chair and vice chair goes beyond just chairing our meetings. So typically the vice chair takes action when the chair is absent and therefore then chairs the board meeting. But the role of chair goes beyond just chairing our meetings. That's why there is a separate pay structure for the chair of the board. And I would like to see our board consider a more collaborative approach to our leadership, where chair and vice chair can kind of share responsibilities for, meeting with ministers and meeting with other organizations and entities to, and it's also typically seen in other organizations as a good way of succession planning, so that more members of your assembly understand the roles and responsibility of the chair. Because chair of the district is different than, chair of a committee.
Okay, seeing no other hands, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Director Gisborne opposed. Motion carried. Okay, call to order, and now we're up to the approval of the agenda. Nothing has changed. The agenda is the agenda. Yeah. So, anybody like to adopt Director Lennox, seconded by Director Fall? Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Minutes of the regular board meeting October 25th, 2023. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, can I get a motion to adopt? Thank you, Director Gisborne, Director Lennox. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carried. Delegations and inquiries. Mr. Clark, Executive Director, Lift Community Services. RE, the results of the 2023 qathet Regional Homeless Count. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Joining us.
Pleasure to be here. There'll be a PowerPoint coming up. My job is to take 10 minutes to explain and share the results of the point-in-time homelessness count that was conducted in April, and the results were published about a month ago. I'm not Julie Jenkins. Julie Jenkins, our housing service manager, is away on leave this week, so I'm filling in for her. And I have been told if I hit this button, things will work. Excellent. So what I'm going to do in the next 10 minutes is just talk about the provincial point-in-time homelessness count in general and what this is about. Talk about the methodology, share the results. Well, talk about the count that happened here on the 17th was our official day of the count. Share the results, give some more context to how we look at these results, and then give you an opportunity to respond and ask any questions and talk about what we might do next. And I'll definitely be time, obviously, for questions at the end. Homeless counts. This has been happening in the province for quite some time, although uniquely, this is the first time our region has participated in the count. Numerous counts took place across the province from March to early May this year. And these counts are administered by a provincial agency called the Homelessness Services Association of BC. And these counts are mostly funded by BC Housing and the province of BC. They collect information about who is experiencing homelessness and identify long-term trends in housing needs. This obviously goes into supporting the province itself and even the federal government in terms of policies and services and interventions to support addressing homelessness in the big picture. It also gives us locally a data set to base our decision-making and planning around this population and around housing needs. 20 provincially funded counts. Greater Vancouver and Victoria, you might notice this if you start looking at these counts. They have a very different report, a lot more detailed information. They are federally funded. They go through a much more detailed counting process, so they're a bit different. But the other 20 counts that are not in those two regions were funded by the province. 2023, as I said, is the first time we have done a regional count, and we intend to continue year over year. Methodology. Every count is designed and overseen by the provincial agency of Homelessness Services Association of BC. The core definition of this methodology is for homelessness, to be someone experiencing homelessness, is someone who does not have a place to pay rent, expect to stay for at least 30 days. That's an important definition. So when we're in these numbers of who is experiencing homelessness, that is the definition they're using. It's a point in time count, 24-hour period from basically the evening of one day to the evening of the next day. It is always considered an undercount because it's the best we can do in 24 hours. The data is collected from shelters and NFA data, or non-fixed address or no fixed address data that comes from the hospital. Usually the night before, and then the survey itself is administered by trained volunteers and agencies on the day of the count. That survey asks a lot of questions and asks people to self-identify if they're experiencing homelessness and a number of other things that we'll show you in just a sec. There's a picture of Councillor Elliott, who was one of our many volunteers that day, sitting at the station that was at the library that day. The qathet count happened on April 17th, 2023. It started on the evening of the 16th and ended on the evening of the 17th. HSABC staff were present in the community to oversee the count, and they collected the surveys for validation and enumeration. It was a multi-pronged approach. We had stations across the community, even out at Tla'amin. We also had a call-in line that day for people who could call in. We did lots of advertising leading up to this day for that. And many local agencies called their clients and tried to track people down that day. We had VCH staff on the streets looking for people. And then we had lots of stations around the community, from Lund to Salisbury Bay, and we had peers out in the community trying to connect with people to respond to the surveys. Tla'amin Nation, Vancouver Coastal Health, the library, and other nonprofit agencies in particular really supported the coordination of this day. And these are our results. We counted 126 people identified as experiencing homelessness in our region. On the night of the count, so the night of the 16th, 26% of those 126 people were sheltered, staying either at an emergency shelter, transition house, a hospital, a jail, or a detox facility. 74% were unsheltered, and that includes people staying in someone else's house, staying in a vehicle, or staying in a makeshift shelter or tent. Again, these are definitions established by agency. Some of the demographics of this 126 people of this population: 60% men, 40% women, 74% adults, youth made up 9%, so 19 and younger, and then seniors 18%, which I believe is 65 and older. 10% identified as a member of the 2SL LGBTQIA+ community. 18% identified as Indigenous. That's compared to 6% of the census population. So that does show in this community and many other communities that there is a disproportionate number of people identifying as Indigenous in the people experiencing homelessness population. Another question they asked that was a big number was 60% of the Indigenous identifying respondents reported having lived through generational experience with residential school. We also, from the data, can pull out reasons for housing loss. This is one of the key questions. 41% identified not enough income as the reason for housing loss. 20% identified substance use issue as a reason, and 20% a landlord-tenant conflict, which is on the rise in our province. Length of time experiencing homelessness, there was 80% that said over 1 year, 8% less than 6 months. Connection to qathet region was another question. That was a very core question. 54% of the people of this population identified as having always been here. 85% had been here for 5 or more years, and 91% had been here for 1 or more years. Number of different health concerns, mental health being the lead of the respondents, and addiction. But there was also other medical conditions, physical disability and learning disability were some of the medical conditions that were reported. 31% reported an acquired brain injury. This is a more recent phenomenon that is associated with the toxic drug supply, and it's an area of concern for this population. 64% reported 2 or more health concerns. In terms of services accessed in the last year, 74% accessing community food, 62% accessing emergency room services, 51% having access safe consumption site like an overdose prevention site, 64% shelter, 56% staying at someone else's house, and 56% having stayed in a vehicle at some point in the last year. We wanted to get a quick snapshot of some comparison communities in the region that are somewhat similar to ours. Comox being a much larger community, we would expect to see such a bigger number there. Other communities that are of similar size, Port Alberni has a bit more, and then Sechelt, Gibsons, and Parksville have a bit lower. But that's how we compare to those sort of regional sort of comparison communities. We also broke this down by some demographics, and we found that we have higher population of seniors, but we're sort of the middle of the pack with respect to these demographics relative to other communities. Even though we have a disproportionate number of people who are identifying as Indigenous, that number is actually much higher in other communities, which shows a bit more of a provincial trend that's concerning. I also want to show, youth. Youth is also something that we're sort of in the middle there. Some context, we looked at our shelter numbers to see if there were some comparisons in the data set that we collected that day and our numbers from the shelter. Our average nightly capacity was 95%. 45% of our nights last year was the shelter was full or over capacity. We served 137 unique individuals, and remembering that the homelessness count is an undercount, we were showing a bit of a higher number of people that accessed our shelter. 60% male, 33% females, those numbers are similar. And then, of course, the Indigenous population, 15% in our shelter, that's pretty close to the 18% in the count. So there's definitely a correlation between our stats at the shelter and the homelessness count. We have seen in the last year some service gaps, and this sort of also came out in the data around the shelter and when talking to people about their experiences. We see an immediate service gap around shelter spaces. We were turning people away last winter. We think the numbers are increasing, and we think it's going to be a colder winter. There's no official warming center in this community. The CRC acts like a warming center, but as you know, it's only open 4 hours a day from Monday to Thursday. Amenities and services are in short supply, things like access to showers, washrooms, garbage and sharps disposals, phone, internet, laundry, transportation, food security. Those are things that are in short supply in terms of the number of times those things are accessible during the day to the public. Housing continuum needs are still gaps in our community. There's a lack of affordable market housing, putting pressure on subsidized and supportive options. There's a number of people in our supportive housing facility that we operate that would be ready to move into market housing, but there's simply way too large of an income jump. There is some hope that we'll get some more rental supplements in our community, but there still is a lack of units in our, and if you remember our housing needs assessment targets, we're still on the way to that as a region. And then we would benefit from some targeted options for certain diverse populations like youth, seniors, women, Indigenous. We've seen examples in communities where women-only shelters or youth-only shelters are really important to attract people to use those services. We are grateful for the regional district's efforts to address homelessness in qathet, in particular your support at the Community Resource Center, which acts as an important place for some hours of the week for people experiencing homelessness and poverty. This count does offer insight into homelessness in our region, and we hope to use it to sort of start doing some planning and discussions about what we might do, and also year over year see if we're making progress. There is an urgent need for more housing options, as we know, and immediate emergency measures to keep people alive and safe this winter. This is what we're up to. We are committed to working with HSBC to continue being a partner on this count. We are exploring opportunities to add shelter spaces through the BC Housing emergency weather response program. So if the weather gets cold enough or windy enough, we can open up an ad hoc shelter for a period of time. So we have made that application. We anticipate updates about the availability of additional rent subsidies for our region very soon. We did apply for a lot of money. We hope it comes through, and we remain a willing partner to address these immediate service gaps and work on long-term housing solutions. That is the end of my presentation. I'm over. I tried.
Just a little bit. Okay.
Please, if there are any questions or responses, go ahead.
Sure. Before I open it up to the rest of the board, I just have a quick question. I understand this is the first time you've done this official count, but I have to believe that you've had informal counts, being in the position that you are for so many years.
Sure, yeah.
Did anything from this count surprise you or leap out at you, or do you think it's pretty accurate as to what
this was within our range of expectations. We thought it was anywhere between 100 and 150. Last year when we talked about this, we were talking about numbers between 80 and 100, so we were not far off.
Okay. And have you noticed any trends? I mean, growing leaps and bounds, growing.
Yeah, when we opened up our first facility in 2019, we believed, and then during the pandemic, we believed homelessness was down to a handful of people. So that the pandemic effect and a number of other things, the cost of living increases were dramatic. We believe a vast majority of these folks were pushed back onto the street, that it established some traction with housing. So some of them have said, like, I've been in this situation for many, many years, but we had some good temporary solutions in place, but things changed fast in the pandemic. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Questions, Director Lennox and Director Fall.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. A couple things I noted in the document that we received, 55 plus is seniors definitely.
Thank you for that correction.
I'm almost there.
You're getting close.
Yeah. And then interesting your comment on no fixed address data from the hospital, you said, so from emergency visits?
Correct. Yeah. So the hospital does, if someone reports to the hospital and they don't have a fixed address, then they're just recorded as NFA, and the hospital can give us that data.
Okay. Sorry, just a couple of quick follow-ups here. I think 95% capacity means that the spaces are available at a 95% rate, and then you said 45% were maximum filled. Is that? Am I reading that right?
Yeah, so the average capacity was 95% across the year.
Yes.
And then 45% of the days we were full or over full. Yeah.
And then one final thing, I would think that this, 126 is the number, is crucial data for the next phases of BC housing applications and things. So this would be considered a crucial piece of that data.
It's crucial in terms of our region's ability to articulate needs. They certainly would. Housing in the province accepts this data as legitimate data.
Okay, so Director Fall and then Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. These counts are very informative. I mean, eye-opening. And when I was down in Victoria before Kool-Aid Society was doing the counts down there, they started them 20 years ago or something, and it was really eye-opening down there. Of course, Victoria has very large population, and just to get information out there both for services but for the community as well, I think it's useful for people to know. And so I have one question about the categories, and maybe you don't have the information, but youth under 25, there's a whole range of youth under 25. So were there any numbers for children with or without parents, but really like 12 years and younger, so
question.
Really young,
I can mark that as a sorry, go ahead.
That really need, are maybe extra vulnerable.
Understood. Thanks for the question. We are going to be receiving some more data, and we're going to look into that. So I'll mark that down as a follow-up. Right now, I do not have that detailed information about that under 25 population, but if we can get more information that we can share, I'll follow up with that.
Thank you.
Director Gisborne?
Yeah, looking through the report and the demographics, and hearing about individuals with no fixed address, this brings something to mind that came to my attention in the last election. Hearing from community members that were living in what were considered illegal suites. They said they didn't have a fixed address and they had a place to live, but they couldn't even vote because they couldn't prove that they actually lived where they lived. And from the sounds of it, those individuals are also being classified as technically homeless. Is that correct through the hospital data of saying no fixed address?
Not quite. That's actually a good question. And I can follow up with how they use the NFA data to inform the numbers. But the 126 is 126 surveys from individuals who answered the survey, and the questions, they were defined as homeless by the HSS ABC. I don't believe any of those 126 people were people living in illegal suites, because they wouldn't have, if they're paying rent by their own self-identification for the next at least 30 days, then they would have been on the side of house. As far as how does NFA data inform the count and the methodology, I certainly could follow up and a little bit more detailed on that.
Yeah. And then the other one is taking also a look at demographics. We see community comparisons or comparison communities, Power, Port Alberni. But those are flat numbers. They're not
flat numbers.
They're not like per capita.
They're not per capita.
So to me, that makes it kind of difficult to figure out where we are, because, you know, C. Shelton Gibson's has a lower number than us, but they also have like what, 30,000 is their population for their regional district, and we're only 20. So it makes it difficult for me to kind of see where we are on that comparison. On the next slide of comparison communities, it has demographics broken down into seniors, women, youth, and Indigenous. But what we're seeing from these studies is that the majority of individuals that are experiencing homeless are adult men. And I'm just wondering, why are adult men not being put into that comparison communities categories? Because I think that is actually where our society as a whole has really underlooked and undervalued men's mental health. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're actually seeing these rises in drug addiction and mental health issues. Is it's not even really socially acceptable for, you know, an adult man to, you know, complain about the issues that they're dealing with.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's like, how do we get past that stigma? And I think if we actually include, you know, those demographics in terms of comparison communities, you got seniors, women, youth, and Indigenous, to actually say, you know, men, you too are also valued.
Women versus those, yeah.
Yeah, it's like how do we ensure that we're kind of getting past, I don't know if it's referred to as toxic masculinity or what happens. I just know that, you know, people that I went to school with are having issues, and it's like they feel like they just have to keep working and keep their head above water until everything falls apart, and next thing you know, they're out on their butt.
Yeah, great. So the phenomenon of homelessness does seem to impact men more than women, and you can see in our community that's no different, 74%. I think in that comparison, we also noticed that women actually was a little higher in our community, which was interesting. Our choice to highlight certain things wasn't based on anything in particular, other than just trying to find a way to quickly show some information, and we're going to do some more analysis. But you make some good points. And the per capita thing, I'm going to follow up with HSBC and ask why they don't do a per capita sort of demonstration of these numbers. I think that'd be useful. Yeah. Maybe they have a reason why they don't think it would be, but if they agree, then maybe we could do some calculations and share that out.
Yeah, because when we compare with per capita, we might see another community with higher overall numbers, but per capita they're lower, in which case we could reach out and, you know, at an AVICC or UBC and say, hey, what are you doing that's actually being successful?
Yeah.
Because
if there's some reason why it's higher in our community versus another.
Yeah, because it's like we see Comox is higher, but they got a much bigger population, and maybe they're actually being more successful. They just have overall higher numbers. So that's my question.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Thank you. I saw Director McCormick's hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Stuart, for your presentation. My question relates to something that I recall from the city of Vancouver 20 years ago. And that was when a homeless count was done there. There was a certain percentage, and I don't remember the number, but there was a significant percentage, at least notable, of people who chose homelessness as a lifestyle. Some of whom lived full-time camping in Stanley Park. They had access to showers at work. They were fully employed, but they chose that lifestyle. And I'm wondering if you ran across any of that in your housing count.
I would say no, based on the definition and the responses to these surveys. Most people were indicated that the primary reason for them experiencing housing loss was life changes that pushed them onto the street. Things like housing, like income loss, tenant conflicts, mental health challenges, things like that were the primary reason. We didn't come across a lot of qualitative or quantitative data that sort of supported homelessness choice. I would say that would be something that would be rare in a community like ours. Yeah, given how difficult it is to be unsheltered in this community.
Okay, seeing no other hand. Oh, Director McCormick.
Thank you. Quick follow-up question then. We also have 3 islands in the regional district, 3 main islands. And I'm wondering if you will have the resources to perhaps do a study on those 3, maybe not Savory necessarily, but certainly Texada and Lasqueti.
Yeah, we learned a lot this first time round. And so we've already talked about ways to improve the count, and the islands did come up in our conversation and our planning conversation about that. So we'll probably reach out at some point through our contacts in the islands to see how we could make sure that we maybe have a station, or at least get the advertising ramped up to include them. So thanks for that comment.
CAO actually got a question.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. Thanks for your statistics, Stuart. And I appreciate the chair confirming that this is the official, or the first official count, and done through HSABC. Because memory serves me correct, or if memory serves me correctly, in the early 2010s to mid 2010s, like 13, 14, 15, somewhere there, I recall some, I'll call them the ad hoc counts.
I'm sure.
Because I remember, the phraseology of couch surfing and things like that.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the numbers, but you mentioned the number 12. Somehow I think it was higher, because we had these numbers to actually, I guess, rationalize or validate why we needed a place in our community for the homeless or those at risk of being homelessness.
Correct. Yeah.
But the numbers that you've relayed to us today are a little bit alarming, because even at my best recollection number, these are like 3 times what they were back then.
Yeah, I know when we were speaking to the province to justify supportive housing coming to our community, and they were certainly looking to get supportive housing facilities in other communities. And this was 2018. It was like a bunch of us scrambling and comparing numbers and trying to come up with a number. I think we talked about 50 to 80 at that time. That was us thinking it was a bit high. That's the highest I think we've ever talked about. So, but when we had our last winter, when we had our capacity of our shelter, and we started counting our shelter stats and started seeing numbers in the hundreds, that's when we first started going, well, we should participate in this count. And sure enough, it's a uncomfortably high number, I would say, for a community of our size.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, I appreciate you coming today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Follow up with some of those questions. Yep, appreciate it.
Sounds great. Okay, moving on. There is no unfinished business. We have 2 pieces of correspondence, and I don't believe we have any business arising from correspondence, but if somebody wants to do something, raise their hand now. Otherwise, we're moving on to the consent agenda. So, anybody have anything they would like to remove from the consent agenda? I'm seeing no hands, so would somebody like to move the consent agenda? Director Gisborne, Director Lennox, and there's no discussion on that, so all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Oh. Right down to the in-camera session. Oh, no, question period, I guess. Mr. Galinsky, are you around?
I am around, Chair. Thank you very much. I don't have any questions, but I'd like to congratulate you on your re-election to the chair of the regional board.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate that. In-camera session, you want to do it?
Yep, I might need 2 breaths for this one.
Yeah.
I move that the board move in camera, the meeting be closed to the public on the grounds that the subject matter to be considered relates to matters covered by the community charter under section 91A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered as for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the regional district or another position appointed by the regional district. C, labor relations or other employee relations. G, litigation or potential litigation affecting the regional district. I, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. D, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a regional district service that are at their preliminary stages, and that in the view of the regional board could be reasonably expected to harm the interests of the regional district if they were held in public. L, discussions with regional district officers and employees respecting regional district objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purposes of preparing an annual report under section 98, annual regional district report. And then the consideration of whether a board meeting should be closed under a provision of this subsection or subsection.
Seconded by Lennox. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. We're going in camera.
faster. Some more cake could be even.
All right.
We are live now, so.
Okay. All right, thank you, Chair.
Okay, so my computer, we are back from the in-camera session and we are rising reporting that the board renewed appointments of Rick Shanneman and Peter Chelberg to the Savory Island Marine Advisory Committee for a term of 2 years ending December 31st, 2025. The board reappointed Brian Redmond, Julie Clark, and Terry Hollow to the Texada Island Recreation Commission for a 2-year term ending December 31st, 2025. And the board will send a letter of appreciation to Ron Smith for his years of service on the commission. There's a little bit of confusion here. The board reappointed Selena Smith to the Powell River Public Library Board of Trustees for a 1-year term commencing January 1st, 2024. And the board acquired Unit 101-4675 Marine Avenue, Powell River, and will explore options for the uses of units 103 and 105 in 2024. That is the Rise and Reports. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Cool.
Unit 201.
Thanks, everyone.
Sorry, 201. Oh, on that.
How are you guys?
Oh, Director McCormick and Director Fall,